What's going on, y'all? Hope everyone is doing fine on this rather stormy evening in Louisville. Wait just a little while for people to continue to join, and we'll get started here pretty soon. But appreciate you all for tuning in. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, definitely feel free to drop them in the comment section. Look forward to hearing what you all had to say. We had a live episode earlier this week. Hadn't had one in a while. And just felt like, let's have another one. Why not? So, like I said, we'll wait for a couple more people to hop in. I'm excited for the show tonight. I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had because everyone's talking about expectations. So, feel like it's the right conversation to have. So we'll wait for, just a couple more people, maybe a minute or so before we, get going. But like I said, make sure to drop some thoughts in the comments and we'll get to those and, continue to, move throughout. So, all right, let's go ahead and see if we can't get started. All right. Sponsorship. Let me pull that up real quick. All right, we're good. All right, here we go. The men's basketball roster is likely complete. Many are discussing what the expectations should be for the Louisville basketball team. On today's episode of the show, we're explaining why the expectation remains the same. It's the NCAA Tournament. We'll explain why on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another live episode, I should say, of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. The Louisville basketball roster is likely finished, although the Cardinals are still looking to potentially add one more player. Regardless, with the team as full as it is, the conversation has shifted to expectations. Make no mistake about it. The expectation is getting into the NCAA tournament this upcoming season. We'll then pivot, go a little bit further in discussion, and identify what the deciding factor is going to be that will lead Louisville to get there. And then from an analytical side of things, we'll discuss the three specific on-the-court metrics that I have pinpointed as focal points for next year's team. I really enjoyed watching what Pat Kelsey did in the transfer portal over the past, 50 some odd days. It was incredible to replace all 13 players on the roster. You love to see it. And to see Louisville not only add star caliber players, starters, also meaningful depth for the immediate future and for the years to come. So the team on paper is very good. I went on record saying that I believe that this is a top 5 team in the ACC. But the conversation is ramping up a ton amongst those on social media. The debate is what should be the expectation. And unfortunately for this, the opinions are on both sides of the pendulum, and some are extreme on both ends. Like, I've seen some say the expectation should be, getting double-digit wins. I feel like that's too low. At least in principle, it's too low, because I feel like that's insinuating that you just have to barely improve what you did last season. There are no multiple year rebuilds anymore with how the transfer portal is designed. But then there's also some that, I've talked to some people, and one person said at least 20 wins in the regular season and an Elite Eight appearance. Can they get there to that point? Well, of course they can. I feel like they can. But to expect that is a completely different conversation. Ultimately, it comes down to, not getting too high, not getting too low. You don't want to be a pessimist, but you also don't want to be a sunshine pumper. So, it's fine to utilize your optimism and couple it with reasoning and justification as a means to predict why Louisville can get to a certain level of success. But if you're using that optimism and bias to blindly get to a point that might be unachievable for the next season, it honestly does more harm than good. Like, you can call me a pessimist all you want. I've tried to keep it as real as I can. Even in Kenny Payne's second year before that, I said no matter who Kenny Payne gets with the NCAA cloud gone, the expectation is very clear to me. And you can't talk me out of this thinking. It is to make the NCAA tournament. If you believe that Louisville is a blue blood program, then that is the perennial expectation. I understand that with the NCAA cloud over the program a couple years ago, valid excuses hurting recruiting. But with the NCAA cloud gone, with NIL, with how much playing time you have at your disposal, no, tournament was the expectation. And I remember somebody flat out asking me, well, when the new coach comes in, does your expectation change? And I was very, very clear. There's probably an episode where I went on record saying this. No, the expectation is 100% still the same. And don't take me saying that making the NCAA tournament is the expectation, or don't take me saying that as a means to say that that's all that they can do. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying for a team that has never played together yet, that I do believe is good enough to make the NCAA tournament. And if you are even remotely good as we think you are, then you should make the NCAA tournament, no problem. And then we're only talking about a ceiling here. But expectation-wise, it's making the tournament. I think if you expect the second weekend a little bit too rich at the moment, now expectations can change based upon the level of play on the court. But right now, on May 23rd, the expectation is making the tournament. Nothing less. Now, you could say that it could be more, and I'll accept that. If you want to say that the expectation is making the second weekend, I'll say, you know what? I wouldn't go as far as saying that yet, but I'm okay with it because I do think that this is a second weekend potential seed. But anything below tournament appearance, no. I'm sorry, I won't accept it. Granted, if you did double your wins, you got to 16 wins. Let's say you went like 16 and 15. You missed the NCAA tournament. Am I going to call for Pat Kelsey's job? No. But is it a failure of expectations, in my opinion? 100%. Because you, along with every other program in the country, get the opportunity to utilize NIL. And Louisville has one of the top NIL budgets in the country, according to those in the know. You have the scholarships available. You have the playing time available. You are, I would say, a blue blood program. Some would say a pseudo blue blood. I think they're definitely a blue blood. Expectation doesn't change. But what about the floor and the ceiling? Like, what is the floor? What is the ceiling? And we got to be realistic because, if you want to say the ceiling and winning the championship, I'm not going to say that you're wrong because I hope you are right. But be realistic here. Year one of a coaching hire. When's the last time that a coach has won the NCAA tournament? I'm not even sure that it's ever happened. Maybe it has. Honestly, you could probably bet that it has. I'm interested to know if a first-year head coach, having to replace a whole new team, not coming in with another coach's players and then succeeding. I'm not saying that. But a coach having to rebuild automatically and then making the NCAA championship and winning it all. Can it happen? I suppose it could. I think that the ceiling for this team truly is Final Four, like realistically. Now, granted, teams oftentimes never reach their ceiling, so we need to go ahead and get that out of the way. He's like, oh, well, Dalton Pitts is predicting a Final Four. No, there's a huge difference between prediction and ceiling. The ceiling here is Final Four. The floor is a little bit tricky because, realistically speaking, you have to call it how it is. The expectation is the NCAA tournament, but the floor for this team, it's so hard to really gauge what that looks like in terms of wins. I think the floor is 500. I think that there is a reality out there where Louisville, the roster doesn't really mesh well. Players struggle getting used to their roles. They lose some close games. They lose games early before they're turning it on at the end of the season. The floor is probably 500. But again, there's a healthy medium between the floor and the ceiling, and that is the expectation. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Doc ECJ, if I'm not mistaken. Comments, Tubby Smith at UK 98 lost to the Cards but won the tournament. See, that was the name that I was going to, but that's why I also made the qualification that you had to rebuild the team. Like, Tubby won with Rick Pitino's players. So I don't really put too much of a parallel in between that outside of first-year coaches. It's a completely different situation. So Pat Kelsey has every opportunity here to get Louisville back to the NCAA tournament, which is a perennial expectation, regardless of year 1, year 3, year 5, year 7. The list goes on. Pat Kelsey even said it. If you don't plan on winning, don't even put your shoes on. He gets it. So if his expectation is making the tournament, yours should be as well. But there is one deciding factor that will determine whether or not Louisville will make the tournament next season. And we'll identify just what that is here in just a moment after we tell you about our friends over at Yahoo Finance. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. But now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. They're the number one finance destination, producing a look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. They've been the number one finance destination for more than 25 years. They've been the brand behind every great investor. Join me in joining YahooFinance.com for comprehensive financial news and analysis. Visit the brand behind every great investor, the number one financial destination, YahooFinance.com. That's YahooFinance.com. Thank you all for joining me on this live edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast, this Thursday installment of the show. I want to hear from you all, your thoughts, your questions, your concerns, compliments of this team, what you feel like the expectation should be year 1, what you think their ceiling could be, what's the worst case scenario, etc. Appreciate you all tuning in on a rather impromptu announcement of live streaming, but nonetheless, we move. I told you that there was one deciding factor that was going to be pretty much the sole determining factor of making the tournament, and that is cohesion. And I feel like you might think that that's a given, and that's because it is. But we're starting to forget about it. Or maybe not forget about it, but we're putting it on the back burner for the conversation to be had in the future. On paper, this team is really good. It's one of the best transfer portal classes in the country, if not the best. Pat Kelsey, he cooked. He cooked with gas. He almost burned down the kitchen. He cooked so much. The only thing that could hold this team back is the thing that can hold any team back with new players, with majority of new players. That is meshing and cohesion. And there are 3 aspects of this that I really look at here. Healing with Jay says, I'm predicting a number 5 tournament seed or better. very fair prediction. I think that is a realistic expectation and a prediction. Meshing as a team is the thing that's going to determine whether this squad can make it to the NCAA tournament. Number one, it is on Pat Kelsey to get the roster to buy in to, number one, his culture, his style of play, and what his vision is for the identity of the team on the court. This is where Pat Kelsey is going to have to earn the money that he's making. He's shown that he can recruit well at this level, but he also has to show that even though he can recruit, he also proves that he's solid X's and O's, which he's shown the ability to flip rosters in a given offseason. He did it with Charleston. He got them back to the NCAA tournament, went to the tournament in back-to-back seasons, mainly with transfers, and it was diamond in the rough type transfers. So with his most talented team that he's ever had by far, you're fighting a little bit of a different battle because you're dealing with higher caliber players like NBA draft players. And that leads into the next segment of, minute distribution and overall usage, rotations. I understand that historically Pat Kelsey has been a coach that likes to play 10 guys in the rotation. It is not like a situational type thing. It is a consistent approach. The pace of play leads to Kelsey subbing constantly because when players are in, he requires them to play fast and give it their all very quickly. Reminds me a ton of how Nate Oates coaches. Almost the same, not necessarily the same, but it's very similar. So you have so many players that averaged over 25 minutes per night at their respective destinations. Some of them averaging over 10 points per game. By default and by the law of averages and by usage and minutes distribution, some of these guys are going to be taking a step back in the level of production in terms of pure statistics. But the sell here is that you are joining a team that has the opportunity to win big. You get compensated very well while you're here, and you play in an offense that is more NBA-esque than I say the vast majority of collegiate offenses. So for me, it's all about getting players to buy into the minutes distribution because, look, you're going to have a couple players that are probably going to average close to 30 minutes a game because it's going to be very challenging to convince said players to come here if you're suggesting otherwise. And at this point, I don't believe Pat Kelsey is selling false promises, or at least I hope that's not the case. I'm not insinuating that. I'm just stating that hopefully the recruiting process was very, very honest. According to one person in the know, in one specific recruitment, it was honest. So I'm hopeful for that. You have to buy into the culture and identity. You have to deviate the minutes distribution. And number three, you have to clearly define the roles for each player and make sure that they cohesively mesh together. And you have to get those players to buy into those roles. Like the key recurring mantra here is getting players to buy in, whether it's the culture, whether it's the playing style, whether it is the effort, whether it is the skill set that you're utilizing, whether it's the role that you're being relied upon to fulfill. That's the main thing here. And I'd say that the third one, if you can buy into the role that you're being asked to play, I think by default, it's almost like you're buying into the culture. You're buying into the minutes distribution. Some of this is on Kelsey to make these decisions on constructing this, and the other half is on the players to execute the game plan and to fill the role. If you're being relied upon to be the go-to scorer, by all means, be the go-to scorer. If you're being relied on to be a facilitator and a secondary scorer, being a rim-running big man that plays well around the rim, a versatile defender that is the point of attack defender on the other player's best or the other team's best player. The list goes on. You sort of catch the drift that I'm putting out here. So before we get to the 3 on-court metrics that I pinpointed as being the focal points, I do want to catch up in the comment section. Let's see. I'm predicting a number 2 seed in the tournament or better with Robert Maxwell. I don't disagree. If you feel highly about this team, I'm not going to disagree with you. I would more so disagree if you felt the other way, that they weren't going to make the tournament. If everything goes well, I think that the ceiling is like a number 2 seed. But I won't go that far yet without seeing this team play. Doc says, the question I asked the other day, how does PK do if KP's guys had all stayed? Conversely, how does KP do if he was coaching this group? If KP was coaching this group, talent alone probably gets you, over your win total this year. The roster was really well constructed by Pat Kelsey. I think they're probably at about 14 wins. Other way around, if Pat Kelsey's coaching Kenny Payne's players, I think that there's some talent on that team. But I don't really think that the roster was constructed all that well. So I would say maybe 17, 18 wins, 500 likely. So let's see. Cards are going to run other teams to death. Yes, I mean, the whole notion is to play fast pace of play, and sub to keep guys fresh and just be pesky for 40 straight minutes. Austin Lawson says, we back. Shout out to you for being a consistent visitor of the channel and viewer of the show. I appreciate some of the familiar names that are tuning in and the new names as well. Dion says, go Cards. Go Cards, Dion. Let's see. KB didn't want to use NIL money to get players. That's one of the wildest things that we heard. Like, why did you not do that? I'm not here to talk about that. All right, so we're all caught up. Before we discuss the 3 on-court metrics that I'm focusing on, I do want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the title sponsor of today's episode. And with the NCAA, with the NBA playoffs coming to a close, NHL is heating up. FanDuel continues to give you a shot to bring home a huge win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Final segment of this live edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Thanks for everyone for tuning in for this impromptu episode. Brian Stickler says, basically my whole thought process. I'd be happy with a tournament bid year 1. Anything more is gravy. Right there. Now, if the team shows that they can be like a top 5 seed, then the expectations change and you expect them to win more games. But nonetheless, let's get into the 3 on-the-court metrics that personally for me, these are the most important. This team is the system that we're going to be watching is one of the fastest perennially. One thing that Louisville struggled with every year under Kenny Payne, and even a good amount under Chris Mack, if I'm not mistaken, the assist to turnover ratio. In other words, efficiency. We've talked about how not only effective of passers the players Kelsey's bringing in, but how willing of passers as well. There's a lot of ball movement. You're going to see movement without the ball, backdoor screens, delayed handoffs, pick and pops, pick and rolls, intricate European-style system that it's all about movement. If you can maintain a positive assist-to-turnover ratio to where you're finding open teammates, getting open shots, creating space, initiating that space, and turning that into assists and limiting your turnovers with how fast you play. Number 1, that's like one of my favorite offensive metrics, or honestly, metrics in general, but offensively specific, that sort of gauges just how good a team is and how good a team can be. You've got the ball handlers on the court that I'm excited to see how they're able to operate in this system. I don't think there's going to be one true lead guard. It probably would be Chucky Hepburn, but there's going to be a lot of moving without the basketball. Assist to turnover ratio is the number one for me because it shows that playing fast is one thing. Playing fast and turning the ball over a ton means nothing. Honestly, it's not good. It's worse than good. But if you are showing that playing fast leading to more buckets and you're not turning it over a lot, then not only are you, by the law of numbers, scoring more points, but you're doing so more efficiently. So that's number one for me. That's sort of the foundation. Number two, piggybacking off of that, I wouldn't go as far as saying that they are like a true Nate Oates-esque team because I don't think they're going to shoot as many threes as Alabama does. Perimeter shooting is 2A, 2B because of, you have the guys on the court that can knock down the shots, but unlocking this offense is the same way that Alabama did. It's the same way that you see it in the NBA. If you can shoot the ball respectably and be, let's say, a top 30, top 40 at the worst three-point shooting team, then it opens up a ton of possibility because you have respectable shooters all around the court, but it also opens up the driving lanes. And you have guys that I think can be extremely effective in that respective sense. Terrence Edwards Jr. loves to put the ball on the ground and get to the basket. Javon Hadley might be the best slasher on the team. Noah Waterman and Kaysen Pryor also sort of play into that role. Kenai Roots, the top 35 true freshman coming in. Hepburn likes to get downhill. Same with Corin Johnson. But there's multiple guys on this team that can knock down the three-point shot. Can knock it down, and knocking it down at a respectable clip, we've seen from the past couple of seasons, two very different entities. The greatest thing for me from like an irony standpoint and just from an overall sad standpoint was people told me over the past couple of years, hey, Louisville's going to have good three-point shooting teams. And I'm looking at the roster and I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, are we looking at the same teams? Like, are these the teams that we're talking about? Because being able to knock three-pointers down and being a good three-point shooting team, way different, and you have to know the difference. Just like the whole guard play discussion. Just because you can dribble a basketball, pass the ball, and make the occasional three-point shot does not mean that you are a guard. Because you make a guard-like play does not mean that you are a guard. Being able to do something and being good at it, two different things. And that spans beyond basketball. That's just life in general. Just take this as Locked on Louisville with a little bit of side life advice that everyone probably already knows about. But the third part of this, to be, if you will, is what is getting lost in the sauce. Rebounding. We're not going to have the tallest team. Now, we will have some size on the team. I mean, if you, like, my most predictable lineup right now, like starting lineup, would be Chucky Hepburn at 6'2", Corin Johnson at 6'2", Terrence Edwards and Javon Hadley at like 6'6", 6'6", 6'7". And then Kaysen Pryor at 6'11". Like, height-wise, that's really solid, but you don't have a guy that can bang down low. I mean, you have James Scott and, for situational reasons, Frank Anselem sort of being rim protectors, but you don't have guys that can bang down low. You have some size, but you're not going to be one of the largest teams in the country. It's about focal point, or it's about being focused on rebounding the ball. Defensively, rebounding and being effective on the boards sort of mitigates that lack of height. Like, Louisville has some very good players in terms of rebounding that do well rebounding for their size. Corin Johnson, Chucky Hepburn rebound well for their size. Terrence Edwards, Javon Hadley, Kaysen Pryor. I mean, you name it. Go down the list and just look at the team. But Boubacar Traore, you can go down with every single player and go down the list and say, yes, 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 yes. Offensive rebounding is more of the focal point for me. Of the past 5 seasons, 4 of those seasons, Pat Kelsey's offense is ranked inside of the KenPom's top 20 in offensive rebounding percentage. And for an offense that likes to play fast, the name of the game is getting second chance opportunities. And when you're shooting a lot of perimeter shots, there's going to be some long rebounds off the rim. So it's always fun for me to watch a team play and understand what people believe is their playing style, and then watch them do something very well that people don't really talk about a ton, and seeing that as being one of the foundations for why they can do what they do. A fast offense reaches its ceiling and clicks on all cylinders when your offensive rebounding is good, because you're throwing up those shots. You want to get second chance opportunities, because one of the reasons why Pat Kelsey's defenses have allowed a ton of points is because by numbers, they're playing really fast on offense to where other teams are already getting more possessions. So logic would lead you to believe that they're going to get more offense. So the key for Louisville is, yes, your offense is going to play fast. You want to have a positive assist to turnover ratio. Yes, you want to be a good perimeter shooting team. You also want to be a team that focuses on crashing the boards and rebounding. You can tell that Pat Kelsey is prioritizing this with the caliber of player in the front court that he's gone out and gotten. So a lot of, they're obviously not the only three things that come to mind here when it comes to focal points, but the main three in my opinion. But just a minute or so left. Drop any other comments or questions you all have before I cut the stream off. Like I said, I appreciate you all for tuning into this live edition of the show. Let's see, catching up. Dion says, been a while since we even had a decent three-point shooting team. I would say, 2019, 2020 is probably the last decent three-point shooting team we've had. And it's wild because that is literally 5 seasons ago? 2020, 2021 to 22, 23, 20. Yeah, it would be 5 seasons ago after this season, of course. CPK is building a great roster, or is great at building a roster. I agree there. Most teams are going to be tough to guard us. Agreed. PK saving the day. L's up. Yes, indeed. Like I said, appreciate you all tuning in. There will be some more episodes probably through the weekend. Everyone have a great holiday weekend. We'll see you back here soon. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here very soon.